wanted to talk a little bit about idols. Now, as a high priest of Melchizedek, I'm not an idolater or anything like that, but I do come from a tradition, Catholicism. I was trained by a Spanish priest and went through all the sacraments and all that. So I understand that there's a place for icons and so on in a tradition, and it goes the same way in Tantra, where an icon is seen more of kind of like an archetype or a container or vessel of information that helps you to access certain things. So when I look at these, this is what I'm looking at. I'm not looking at as me worshiping this thing, whatever this thing is, right? That's not the way I'm looking at it. I'm looking at it as a piece of information. Like, for example, I'll show you right here. See if I can change around. You can see him. He's from the Congo, right? He's something I acquired from a fellow by the name of Frank, and he was a store owner at the local flea market, and unfortunately, Frank passed away during the plague. But this was the last thing I acquired from him, and it really brings this archetype to life. And this is the archetype of Saturn, pretty much, or the tradition I was initiated into, Babaluaye or Coayende. But ultimately, it's a Saturnian image of an old man, and including his foot, like even his foot was broken, the left one. I had to insert a rod to kind of bring the foot together, so to speak. So even in that regards, he fits the archetype perfectly. So, and he wears ragged clothes, so he shows up as a beggar with leprosy and rejected by society. So he's ultimately the old man, the sorcerer, right? The black cubester. But that's an element of what I'm talking about, when I'm talking about idols. But and then on my mother's side, I come from a gypsy lineage from Hungary, from the Arpad dynasty. They fell in 1301, and they must have joined a gypsy group at that point, ended up somewhere in Portugal, and then from there to islands like Azores, Madeira, and from there Canaries, and from there Puerto Rico. But in the gypsy tradition, Roma tradition, Gitano tradition, as they say, or Calais, in Iberia, they venerate images that are dark skinned. Say, for example, in southern France, you have Kalisara, which means the Black Sarah, which is a very Gnostic kind of tradition, and that's what I come from, a very Gnostic tradition. But this is one of the reasons why I have the Black Madonna, right? This is an Italian Black Madonna, and the reason for that is because she comes from more ancient traditions like Isis and Kali and so on, the Dark Mother archetype. But this is my grandmother's icon, so same thing, right? And I assumed this as my own along with Saint Cyprian, because this, Saint Martin, was of mixed heritage. I'm of mixed heritage, and also he was a vegetarian, and I've been a vegetarian since about the age of 38. So I've adopted that as my own. And then you have this right here. This is kind of like more along the tantric perspective, right? You have Indian as well as Tibetan versions of her,
and she represents compassion. She's kind of like what would be in the West the Shekinah or the Holy Ghost, which I don't agree with modern Christians that want to slap a penis on the Holy Ghost. The Holy Ghost is feminine, and the divine feminine has been one of those things that has been persecuted all throughout Christian history. And I come from one of those persecuted groups that ended up in exile in the Caribbean. My great-great-grandparents and great-grandparents were disciples of a dragon mother who performed miracles that would make Jesus blush. And she came out of nowhere, disappeared to nowhere, and didn't eat, didn't drink, lived in the cave. They tried to kill her and the bullets would just slip off. So that's the tradition I come from. The tradition that was exiled by the Mother Church because they were much more focused on penises. But going back to idols, like what is, again, I'm not condoning idolatry and I'm not opposing it. I'm just saying that for sorcerers, the way we would look at something like this would be to see it as a vessel containing information. So it's not it doesn't necessarily have to be offensive to Abrahamics, that despise images and so on. I get that. There's iconoclastic movements, and there's been iconoclastic movements in Orthodoxy as well as Catholicism, and I get all that. But I'm just a pragmatist. I'm not a theologian. I'm not interested in theological debates, discussions of any kind. I'm a pragmatist. What matters to me is what works. And that's all that matters as far as I'm concerned, because coming from the working classes as I do, that's the only thing that matters. Does it work? Right? So I take the same approach with the sorcery. So yeah, I don't see them as wrong. On the contrary, they're pieces of culture, and they do contain information. And depending on the state of this, we can access or not access that information. Depends on where is this at, right? So they can be anchors for us. You could place something like the old man Saturn that I have there, sculpted from the Congo, and you can place it in your mnemonic of your mind, because most of this stuff was pre-literate, right? My great-great-grandpa was a sorcerer who did not know how to read and write, so he would put this stuff in his head. But something like that would be something that you would place in, say, like the Tree of Life, and place it in the sphere of Saturn or something like that. Those are the kinds of mnemonic techniques that the ancients used to store vast amounts of information. But yes, I see these images as just containers of information. I'm not worshiping this. I see this as a vessel. So I just wanted to share that with you. And what you do, whether you worship idols or whether you use them whatever way you use them, I don't have any control over that. I'm just saying how me as a sorcerer, how I approach it, considering that I come from a very eclectic background. So there's that.